by the other synoptic gospels, but they leave out the critical part that I want us to think about and remember this morning. You know this story. The man comes to Jesus about his son who is an epileptic and who the disciples have not been able to heal. Someone from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out, "I believe. Help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Those of you who were here last week know that we are in the month of October, as we come to the celebration of the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, looking at the 5 solas. Sola being the Latin for only. The Reformers had these tenets that came to the fore among all of them that were important to their faith and to the need for reformation. The first was grace alone. Everything is based on the gift of God, of grace. But the other watchword is we are justified by grace through faith. So we're going to look at faith today. Faith is one of those funny things. There are tons and tons and tons of definitions of faith and great quotes about faith. You can go online and find a ton of them yourself. But the truth is that, or at least today's truth from me, is we're going to actually look a little bit at what faith is not. Sometimes it's clearer when we're talking about words that we use constantly and assume that we have a common understanding. Sometimes it's important to look at what they're not. And so we're going to look at what faith is not. And the first thing that I would suggest is that faith is not something we can do on our own. Like grace, faith is a gift of God. Marcus Borg, some of you may have read some of Marcus Borg's work. He tells that he grew up in a Lutheran tradition, and of course, because it was Lutheran, it emphasized salvation by grace and not by works, and that justification by grace was something he grew up with constantly, by grace through faith. But instead of what the Reformation hoped and wanted, which was people understanding that these were gifts of God to us, that over time, that strong emphasis on grace got transformed into a new system of competition, and the emphasis got placed upon faith rather than grace, and faith insidiously became the new requirement, the new law. Any of you get this? That anxiety that maybe my faith isn't good enough? It isn't strong enough? I don't maybe believe all the right things. That anxiety and self-preoccupation is not what faith alone is about. That faith is a gift to us from God. I want to start with, and I'm taking this right from his writing because he did such a good job. William Platcher wrote a recent commentary, theological commentary on the book of Mark. He says, in regards to the Father's statement, and I have to tell you, that Father's statement has been a comfort to me my entire life. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. The two go together. He says, Calvin said about that those two statements appear to contradict each other, but there are none of us that doesn't experience both of those in ourselves. Faith is not the same as certainty. The 20th century theologian Paul Tillich kept saying, he said, if doubt appears, it should not be considered as the negation of faith, but an element which was always and will always be present in the act of faith. And he uses the example of loaning some money to a friend that's in financial difficulties. You know your friend, you trust him, and you give him the faith of loaning him that money, even though you know that he's already been in financial trouble, and the possibility is he could get in worse financial trouble. But you take that risk. Faith takes courage. And he says, I love this, Soren Kierkegaard. Anybody ever read any Kierkegaard? He's a challenge, but well worth it. He's the one who is credited with the idea of the leap of faith. But what he says about this story is, notice that the Father doesn't say, I believe, I have doubts, but I'm going to try all the harder to believe. You get that? Get the difference? He's not trying to believe. He rightly says to Jesus, you help my unbelief. It's not something we can make ourselves do. It's not something we can will ourselves into. We can't find our way to hope just by jumping. Sometimes we need to be carried, and we need to trust God to do that for us. And so from Kierkegaard, I want to make a big leap, not of faith, but to a much more common example. How many of you saw the movie Oh God? Old movie, 1977, but I expect some of you have seen it multiple times. It's a great movie. George Burns, of course, plays God, and he appears to a grocery store clerk named Jerry Landers, who was played by John Denver. And Jerry does what lots of people do when they encounter the Almighty. He asks for a sign. So God cheerfully complied and handed him his business card, which had one word on it, God. Okay. The point, God doesn't give out business cards, of course, but we sometimes live our faith lives as though we're expecting that to happen. We hang back, we reserve judgment, we wait for some one incontrovertible spiritual experience that will prove to us beyond a shadow of a doubt that God exists and that God loves us. And oftentimes we mistake things that we can touch for God. Maybe it's the church building in which we worship, or the people with whom we worship, who will inevitably disappoint us when we see the sinner in them. Sometimes it's the Bible, which some people manage to turn into a tool of judgment. God isn't any of those things. God says, what? I am that I am. God is not a person that we can name and know fully. The essence of faith is not for us to reach out and touch God, but for God to reach out and touch us. God is doing the touching and will develop the faith in us. The second thing is that faith is not certainty. By definition, faith cannot be certainty. Because if we know something as an absolute positive certainty, we don't have to believe it. It is. Correct? Faith comes in when we can't prove in some scientific or logical way something, but we trust it anyway. Martin Luther King Jr. said, faith is taking the first step even when you can't see the whole staircase. It's a good one. Frederick Buechner, who always has something interesting to say, says, doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it alive and moving. That is so true, folks. I have much more fear about people who think they know everything there is to know about God than the ones who say, I don't really know, but I know He's there, and I know that He loves me, and I can trust that. Bertrand Russell said the problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so sure of themselves, while wise men are full of doubt. And Holmes Hartshorne, who's somebody you probably haven't ever read, said, faith without doubt is dead, but doubt without faith is death. Think about that one. That's a big one. Faith without doubt is dead, but doubt without faith is death. Doubt that's not grounded in an ultimate confidence in the cross of Christ will lead us down the path to despair. But where it's rooted, where doubt is rooted in faith, it becomes the source of honesty, humility, and joy in our lives. Somebody said that we're living in an age not of faith versus doubt, but of faith versus belief. People are believing anything and everything. Think about false information and how suckers we are to take in so much. But at the same time, while we believe all kinds of things, we don't have faith in very much. Some of the best and most noted Christians are people who have lived their entire lives beset by faith, by doubt. Mother Teresa talks about time after time after time in her journal that she felt the loss of God in her life, that she feared that God was not God or didn't exist, or that if He did, He didn't love her. It goes on and on. In fact, she wrote to the Archbishop, I find no words to express the depths of the darkness. St. John of the Cross talks about the way of darkness. Luther struggled his whole life. Martin Luther struggled his whole life with doubts. So doubts certainly are not a concern for us to worry about, but something for us to lay at the feet of God for God's response and guidance. Finally, faith is not the opposite of works. You all have heard this. There's constant back and forth with, what proves somebody's faith. And James, of course, says faith is nothing if there are no works. The two go together. There's no faith or any real true works unless they are, that the works are the response to the gift of grace and love and faith. Teresa of Avila, another one of the giants of faith who had many doubts in her life, wrote in her book, The Interior Castle, "We cannot know whether we love God, although there may be strong reason for thinking so. But there can be no doubt about whether we love our neighbor or not." When we can show love for neighbor, it indicates that we have love for God and God for us. Leonard Sweet, who does all kinds of stuff with church development, says, when faith becomes all about beliefs and works instead of relationships, then we're really in love with our own thoughts and opinions and doings. Not an image of God, but an image of ourselves. The last thing is that faith is never easy, nor is it static. We don't come to faith and then we're 100% filled with faith and we're done. That's why we talk about a journey of faith. Our entire lives are journeys of faith in which our faith waxes and wanes, and hopefully over time grows larger and deeper. But it is a constant flux. David Gelertner was a professor of computer science at Yale University who opened one of the Unabomber's bombs. He was the 23rd victim, and he nearly died from the attack. He dragged himself to the school infirmary and somehow survived the attack, but he had to endure months of reconstructive surgery from the severe scars on his body. He is an observant Jew. He grew up on those same Bible stories that recount how God delivered his faithful ones who suffered. And you know what he said he learned from this experience? Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the presence of courage. Faith is the presence of courage. Courage that God gives us because we know that God is present with us in our doubts. Joe Biden often talks about how his faith has sustained him through the death of his son. His wife posted a little short piece of quote from Soren Kierkegaard on his mirror that said, "Faith sees best in the dark." The whole quote is what I want to end with. Well, not the whole quote, it's a long book. The paragraph from which that comes. When sagacity, in other words, human understanding, is able to perceive the beneficialness, the goodness in something, then faith cannot see God. When we can see it with our heads, then faith is unable to see God. But when in the dark night of suffering, sagacity cannot see a handbreadth ahead of it, then faith can see God, since faith sees best in the dark. I want to finish with a prayer that Wendell Frericks was a professor of Old Testament at Luther Seminary, and he always opened his classes with wonderful prayers. And one of his students later gathered those prayers, which were so very alive, into a book. And I will close with one of his prayers. Lord, how much faith are we going to need? Enough to move a mountain? What if we can't even move a gopher hill? Could the day come when doubt or unbelief would take over altogether? There are so many around us who live without knowing you. Are they content to be as they appear to be? Will they be able to handle all the trouble to come their way? Will we be better off than they? Lord, increase our faith. Give us not just enough to get by, not just enough for ourselves, but some to share as well. Increase our witness. Make it faithful and true. Give us the tenacity to hold on in the good as well as the evil day. Amen.